for any obibiara washemi aha a Ghanatube so me mamo akwaba matna saying any natural science no bebre ego a etwem etewusia for pass no mean semre no me pese ubedi mechi na yawabotie nsem bia ekoso e wo Ghana na yaba.
A lawyer, Jonathan Amable, has gone to the Supreme Court. Indeed, he has two issues. In February, he went to the Supreme Court to ask for interpretation of whether the government, treasury bills, treasury bonds, and some of its domestic financing activities constituted loans that required prior parliamentary approval, because as things stand now, those issues do not get prior parliamentary approval explicitly before the government undertakes the borrowing. That matter has not yet been determined. Now, Mr. Amable has gone back to the Supreme Court to say, you know what? If government borrows any further money from the domestic market, whether it's a bond market or the treasury bill market, the consequences would be grave for the economy and our future, and therefore the court should grant an order of what the lawyers call interlocutory injunction to restrain the state from undertaking any activity which constitutes borrowing, or what economists call debt financing, including raising debt finance through temporary advances and other loans from the Bank of Ghana, or the issuance of treasury bills. Now, treasury bills and treasury bonds have been the main way government has been raising money since the domestic debt exchange. We know that government, basically, what does it do? You raise revenue to take care of your expenditures. If you can't raise enough tax revenue, what do? You borrow. And this borrowing takes the form of external borrowing or domestic borrowing. And the treasury bonds and treasury bills have become the mainstay of government since the economic crisis of July to December 2022. So Jonathan K. Amable is a private legal practitioner. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you for having me and for the interest you've shown in the matter.
Wonderful. So a lawyer who is taking on a serious economics and finance issue, just give me an insight into your interest in this issue of government borrowing and how that interest led you to go as far as the Supreme Court in February to seek interpretation of some key issues.
Thank you. So I'm a finance lawyer.
Okay.
So finance is what I specialize in. So I smiled when you said it's more of a legal issue than economic issue, because the two are actually intertwined.
Wonderful.
The kind of work that I do mostly is public finance, corporate finance. So I advise the government if it wants in relation to domestic or even foreign debt issuances. I advise corporates on the market. I advise even the regulators. So the SEC, the Ghana Stock Exchange. Wow. Bank of Ghana. So this field is a field that I've been practicing for several years now, and so some of the matters are matters that I know quite intimately, and especially on the back of the domestic debt exchange program that has just happened, and the domestic debt restructuring program, that the painful exercise that has just been undertaken. I realized that there's a certain loophole that needs to be closed, and when that loophole is closed, it would give some reprieve to Ghanaians in terms of how some of these things would come about, and that really necessitated my action to go to the Supreme Court, not for an interpretation, because under Article 2 of the Constitution, the Supreme Court has two jurisdictions. There's an interpretative jurisdiction and there's an enforcement jurisdiction.
Wonderful.
So the interpretation jurisdiction means that something is unclear and you are asking the Supreme Court, so we normally use the words a true and proper interpretation of so and so. So there's that. And then there's also the general enforcement jurisdiction, where the Constitution says that if there's an act that has been done either by Parliament or by the executive or any person which contravenes the Constitution, you bring that action to the Supreme Court for that action to be declared unconstitutional and null and void. And if you ask for consequential orders, then consequential orders will be given. So that was the February suit that.
So the February suit was to declare unconstitutional. What specifically?
So the February suit was attacking legislation, pieces of legislation, statutes. Okay. So Section 30 of the Bank of Ghana Act, which enables the Bank of Ghana to extend loans to the government. This is either through the Bank of Ghana directly purchasing T-bills from the government, or the Bank of Ghana purchasing bonds from the government, or the Bank of Ghana giving advances, temporary advances. So Section 30 enables the Bank of Ghana to lend to the government. And then Section 61 of the Public Financial Management Act also enables the government to borrow money through the issuance of T-bills. So through the issuance of T-bills, through the issuance of treasury notes, treasury bonds, basically domestic debt securities. Section 61 of the Public Financial Management Act enables the government to do these things. Now, when you look at the constitutional framework under Article 181, Article 181, 3 and 4 generally govern how the government should borrow. Now, I mean, it's tried learning in legal terms that borrowing is not a right. Borrowing is a power. The power is given to you by statute, or is given to you by even a company. The power is given to the directors by the constitution. And so that statute or constitution can place limits on how the borrowing power is exercised. Now, in relation to the government of Ghana, Article 181 is clear that government should borrow under a statute, and the statute should state that the borrowing would not become effective unless the terms and conditions of the borrowing are laid before Parliament for approval. So it's very clear. It says that the borrowing should not become effective unless the terms are laid before Parliament for approval. And then Article 181.6 goes further to define borrowing or define loans for the purpose of Article 181. And you will see the Constitution is very interesting. In several instances, the Constitution uses words, it never bothers to define them. There's a general definition part of the Constitution, but you realize that for the purpose of Article 181, the Constitution is very specific. And I know that you've opened
so maybe let's read it. All right. So we're trying to sort of get the sense of the basis for the action. Don't forget, he's saying there are specific statutes and laws that contravene this Article 181. And by the way, because it's Constitution, this is higher.
Yes.
So anything in law that in Ghana that goes against this one is the superior law. 181 loans. Parliament, this is 181. Parliament may by resolution supported by the votes of a majority of all members of Parliament authorize the government to enter into an agreement for the granting of a loan out of any public fund or public account. 2. An agreement entered upon under clause 1 that I just read of this article shall be laid before Parliament and shall not come into operation unless it is approved by a resolution of Parliament. 3. No loan shall be raised by the government on behalf of itself or any other public institution or authority otherwise than or under the authority of an act of Parliament. So it's like reinforcing this. 4. An act of Parliament enacted in accordance with the clause 3 that I just read shall provide A, that the terms and conditions of the loan shall be laid before Parliament and shall not come into operation unless they have been approved by a resolution of Parliament, and B, that any money received in respect of that loan shall be paid into a consolidated fund and form part of the fund or into some other public fund of Ghana existing either or created for the purpose of the loan. Then let me end with 5. This article shall, with the necessary modifications by Parliament, apply to an international business or economic transaction to which the government is party as it applies to a loan.
Can you just add 6? Yes.
For the purposes of this article, loan, into quotes, includes any monies lent or given to or by government on condition of return or repayment, and any other forms of borrowing or lending in respect of which A, monies from the consolidated fund or any public fund may be used for payment or repayment, or B, monies from any fund by whatever name called established for the purpose of payment or repayment, whether directly or indirectly, may be used for payment or repayment. And then 7, the ministry responsible for finance shall at such times as Parliament may determine present to Parliament any information concerning any discrepancies relating to the granting of loans, their repayment and servicing, the payment into a consolidated fund or other public fund of money derived from loans raised on institutions outside Ghana. Why did you ask me to read 6?
Great. So let me just put 181 in context.
Yeah.
181 actually governs 3 types of transactions. If you look at 1 and 2, they govern situations where the government is the lending party. So the government is giving a loan to someone.
Good.
Then 3 and 4 deal with situations where the government is the borrowing party or borrowing on behalf of another institution.
Wonderful.
So 3 and 4 deal with the situation where typically the government will be the borrower.
Yeah.
And that is what is in contemplation.
So you are dealing with government borrowing. So this is 181, 3 and 4. That's what we are dealing with.
Great. Then 5 deals with international business and economic transactions.
Wonderful.
And Ghanaians have a history with that, because if you will recall, the case involving Alfred ʻOUPREME, it had to do with 181.5.
Okay.
Where the claim was that the contract with Alfred ʻOUPREME was, and Waterville, was an international business and economic transaction. So on the basis that it did not have parliamentary approval, it was void. And the Supreme Court declared it void, and on the basis of that, the state went after ɁUPREME to try and reclaim the monies that he had got from that contract, because the principle in relation to 181 is that you cannot derive any benefit from an unconstitutional contract. You see that 3 and 4 are very clear that the borrowing shall not come into effect until parliamentary approval is obtained.
So 5 deals with international transactions.
Exactly. If you look at even the IMF reviews, you see that they flagged it, that domestic debt and payment of interest in relation to domestic debt has become a significant portion of our expenses. It's eating up all our revenue. And when you look at the data here, I mean, it's quite clear. From 53 billion in 2016 to a situation where we have 290 billion as of 2024. We are currently in a dispensation where every week the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance are trying to raise as much as 4 billion, 5 billion, 6 billion.
Every week?
Every week.
4 billion cedis a week.
Last week, they were trying to raise 6.8 billion. And you see, sometimes I also have
through T-bills.
Through T-bills alone. Last week, they were trying to raise 6.8 billion. The week before that, they were trying to raise 6.2 billion. So we don't really hear the figures in the media. All you hear is, oh, government T-bills have been undersubscribed. But what does that undersubscription mean?
Government actually wanted more.
They wanted more, and they've got more, because prior to that, they were maybe taking 4 billion, they were raising 4 billion, and all these huge figures have only come up since about 2022, even because before 2022, the portion of T-bills was quite low.
Let me know of you. My guest is a lawyer who says government domestic financing needs to get parliamentary approval. He took the matter to court in February this year. Somehow the matter hasn't really gotten a hearing. So now he's asking for an injunction for any further borrowing. So essentially, government should not be able to raise a peswa starting when the matter will be heard. He filed 11th November until the substantive matter is determined. Now, what are the implications of that for government financing 2 weeks to an election?
Massive payments that are coming up in 2027, 2028. When you look at the Eurobonds, there are coupon payments, default interest payments, and things that are starting as early as January 2025. And there is absolutely nowhere that the money is coming from, because the international capital markets are close to us. So if we continue borrowing in this way, there's absolutely no way.
Just a quick retort. So what I know is that treasury bills and treasury bonds are part of what we are told is open market operations.
You are here for an for me. I must pass and would image in your cotier in summer. A cost on my gun one day, and I will can't find some for comments. No, a bra comment section. Now making Kayamo Ghana tips on you, or Duffo Snowy and Sunday. I was out for Cecilia Macram.